What could have been done? A question inevitably asked in the wake of a mass tragedy, this video seeks to answer by illustrating the pathway to violence, a 6-step model for identifying suspicious behavior so that potential harm can be mitigated. We begin with former Boston Police Commissioner Ed Davis, who led the effort in examining what could have been done to prevent the 2013 Boston Marathon attacks.
One of the things that we recognized after sort of doing a post-mortem on the Tsarnaev investigation was that Tamerlan had acted out in the mosque in Cambridge. On 2 different occasions he had objected and had arguments with the imam about what the imam was suggesting. He wanted the imam to be more radical, to be more in alignment with Sharia law and less Western in the way that he was teaching Islam. If that imam had felt comfortable enough with us to call us and say, I don't know what to do with this guy, they eventually ejected him from the mosque. If at some point we had heard about that, it may have reactivated the FBI investigation. And whether it was his family or the community around him, if someone had reached out to us, it might have changed the whole trajectory of this incident.
In my view, the first line of defense is that neighborhood that will detect that anomaly. Changes in behavior, withdrawal from the community. In the case of the older Tamerlan Tsarnaev, he develops these ideas that this is being done to me because of who I am. It's important to get into that kind of nuance because narratives matter when you're trying to assess whether an individual is radicalizing or not, or on the path to radicalization. One could only hope for a model, if you will, a path to radicalization. The human mind obviously is complex, but there seems to be some general commonalities.
So what are these commonalities, and what can they tell us about potential acts of violence? Many experts agree that the key to understanding this lies within the pathway to violence.
So the pathway to violence, which was classically represented by Calhoun and Weston's model, starts off with the presence of a grievance. And to that grievance, the person begins to attach the ideation for the use of violence or significantly disruptive behavior. From ideation then, the next stage, and we'll see increasing intensity of effort in it, is the planning stage. Now the person is thinking about the planning, the who, what, when, and where, the development of the thought, of the plan, still at a conceptual level. The next stage then is the preparatory stage. What do I need in order to fulfill the plan? The means, the weapons, the tools, the equipment, the clothing, either that is necessary to effect the plan or that has a significant psychological or fantasy. That's what persons are trying to prepare the capability or acquire the capability. In Calhoun and Weston's model, then they talk about the breach, which is about probing behaviors, checking vulnerabilities within systems to see where the best entry points are, or escape points if that's part of the plan, and then the attack or the implementation phase. Models, however, we need to keep in mind are not perfect representations of reality. They're approximations to give us a way of thinking about issues, of understanding the development. So an important concept in the pathway to violence is to not take it literally in terms of the sequence of events that are laid out. And so it's important to look for those as milestones along the pathway versus concrete steps, like going up a linear staircase. So the first component of it, the grievance, this is the broadest base. The good news about people with grievances is most are never violent or significantly disruptive before. Virtually all of us from time to time develops grievances about aspects of the people around us, our jobs, our family situations, life in general.
Happens all the time, right? When you think about what is the definition of a grievance, right? It's a real or perceived wrong. Now, does everyone take a grievance and it goes further into violent ideation, planning, preparation, etc.? No, that's much less common. When you don't understand the cause for that person, why are they doing what they're doing, you don't know whether there was a place to intervene, right? Whether it's a mental health issue, right? Whether they've suffered a significant loss recently, whether they're under a significant number of multiple stressors have just kind of been piling on, and there was this place where they feel like you know what, this is kind of my only option. You don't know that there isn't anything you can do if you don't know what the actual problem is.
Lots of people have bad experiences, grievances, and let it go and move on. But a sense of fixation on the grievance or the need for resolution is an indication that this is a grievance that's a bit different than normal. So the next step is the ideation for the use of violence. And there's a lot of influences on this. Again, when there's the fixation on either the grievance or the need for resolution or the thoughts about resolution through violent means, that's a concern-enhancing aspect of the ideation. The person who obsesses and ruminates and continues to invest effort of thought and action moving forward to that typically begins to think on a bit more grander scale. As we look at the tipping point between the idea to the action, the planning is really about the who, what, when, and where. The why come from the first two stages. Who would best satisfy who or what would most satisfy my fantasies? And then when I'm going to take action, who's available to me and are they vulnerable? The preparatory stage is preparing the capability, which involves both the skill and the will. The other things that are important in the preparatory stage is acquiring the means to fulfill the plan. Lots of us make plans and don't have the resources, the skills, or the will to implement the plan. And so what would be necessary? Do you need locks and chains to secure doors, to limit egress so there's more victims stay available to me for a longer period of time, or to limit emergency services ingress so I've got more time? For me, the probing and the breaching is part of the attack, and certainly the reason for breaking out in the model is that there are some people that will do a preliminary probe or attempt to breach. So that's part of what the probing is testing the security. You know how far you can get. You know whether the guard really checks your security badge when you're coming through, whether there's a metal detector or not.
Understanding the potential indicators of those who may be along the pathway to violence is important. But are there cases that show how reporting these behaviors have any effect?
There's a whole database of them. So the U.S. Department of Justice has funded, it's now available online, the beginnings of it, and it is a collection of circumstances where individuals were expressing the ideation and developing the capacity to engage in acts of significant violence in schools and campuses and a few other workplaces. But the focus of the research through the Police Foundation is on schools and campuses, mostly schools, K through 12 schools. What we're finding is that there are literally hundreds of these cases.
With an understanding of behavioral indicators, what can organizations do to mitigate potential violent acts?
Warnings and indicators is really what I think the question is. Individually, each one of these things do not add up to a threat, so to speak, but when they are put together in a collective, it gives you more confidence, perhaps, that there's something more to be looked at. What you don't want to do is create a system wherein anonymous information can come in without context, or you encourage people to report observations that are out of the ordinary, and then they go into a black hole, there's no feedback, and worse yet, that there would be no action. I use an acronym called VIEW, V-I-E-W, and I think it's reasonable, I think it's fair, and I think it fits in both worlds. So the V would be vigilance, all right? So every employee from the top down, regardless of the size of the organization, has to understand what normal looks like. That's called situational awareness. So that's the V. The I in my acronym stands for introspection. That's the ability to understand when changes to normal might be occurring. The E I use to represent engagement. That could mean fostering a mechanism that enables individuals to report when they see things that aren't in that normal status. And then the W I use to remind people about willingness to act. And that's probably where the biggest gap occurs in my mind. I think we do a decent job now because of the see something, say something paradigm. Individuals are encouraged and often empowered to report things, but what we do about it thereafter is what happens. So that willingness to act, operationalizing and putting action into that is really the key follow-on, so that when somebody says something, you might be the one that has to do something.
For more information, please visit the resources found at cisa.gov/active-shooter-preparedness. These include tips on responding to a variety of emerging threats, a feature-length comprehensive emergency action planning video, and resources related to best practices for your organization and community.